Welcome back to The Growth Show. I'm your host, Whitney Bateson, and I am so excited to welcome Jessica Setnick to the podcast today. So Jessica looks like a suburban mom, her words, and talks like a motivational speaker, which you will hear, but her real superpower is reinventing her career, so she's always having fun. And we had a lot of fun recording this podcast. From her first job in a children's hospital to her pro bono work fighting insurance companies, Jessica has repurposed her educational credentials and work experience multiple times into many different things. She has degrees in anthropology and sports nutrition and is considered a worldwide author, speaker, and expert on eating disorders. And her latest adventure is as a business coach for health professionals, breaking into professional speaking. Jessica loves the authenticity that being your own boss allows, and she's excited to share some of her strategies with us today. So in today's episode, Jessica is going to be talking to us about her career pivots and what led her to now focus on speaking, and just offer so much advice when it comes to building confidence with speaking, how to sell your services correctly when it comes to speaking, pricing. That's a big topic we're going to cover. So I won't give it all away. Let's get into the conversation. Hello. Welcome to the show, Jessica.
Thank you. So happy to be here.
Yeah, I am so excited to have you here. We were chit-chatting before we hit record, already having some laughs. So I think this is going to be a great episode. And I'm really excited to have you here to talk about your journey and also the work that you're doing now. You've had multiple career pivots as a healthcare professional. So let's just start there and dive
Sure.
in. So how did you go from hospital dietitian to speaking coach? Was this always the plan?
The plan?
Yeah.
I don't even have a PLA. No, I started out and all I knew when I went to college is I wanted to be a CEO. And then when I found out, oh yeah, you don't really start there. And also PS, I got a C minus my first semester in calculus. So transferring into the business school was never going to happen. So I just took all these classes and they piled up in anthropology. And then I didn't even know what anthropology was. And it turns out it's the study of humans. Like, how interesting is that? And so then I took a nutrition class as an elective. And I was like, this is so interesting. What happens when food goes inside your body? Wait, this is a career. I could actually have a career in something. So come to find out, oh, I have to be a registered dietitian. I'm in school forever. And then finally I get out and I get my dream job in a children's hospital with the eating disorder program where it had just started. And oh my gosh, it was so nuts. Like, they started with 2 patients, and then 2 years later, it was like they had 5 programs with 400 patients. It was nuts, and still one dietitian. And so that's when at some point along there, I realized this is not sustainable. I could do this better. And I started my exit strategy. So then I'm in private practice. Okay, great. Seeing patients with eating disorders, that's just my sort of my gift, let's say, because I'm really good at hearing what people are saying underneath what they're saying. And so that's a really good skill in eating disorder care.
Yeah.
Then people were asking me all these questions about it, and this is going to make me sound super old, but it was the dawn of the internet. And so the whole academy had one listserv, like one chat room. And so it changed everything about how dietitians dietitianed, right? Because you could go in there in the morning to work, type a question, and in the afternoon have an answer to your question. And you were seeing patients all day. Instead of researching your question all day, someone who was an expert had answered your question for you already. Changed everything. And so I started answering people's questions about eating disorders, and that's how I became known as someone who has the answers. So I decided to do a workshop. Eating disorders boot camp. The first one was in Montana. It was literally like, I just made it up. I flew out to Montana. I sat there in my hotel room with 3-ring binders, sticking materials in. It was awesome. And so I was just like, I can do this. I can invent something. And it was sort of like, oh, I'm a CEO. Whoa, accidental CEO, right?
Yeah.
And so then eating disorders boot camp took off. And then over the course of time, I stopped doing boot camp and I stopped my private practice and I worked as a spokesperson because speaking was a gift I had. And so I had several eating disorder hospitals that hired me as spokespeople in a row. And then I got laid off from that. And I was like, oh, what am I going to do? Because I totally closed my practice to be a speaker. And then I remembered, like, whoa, I don't need to be employed by someone to do this. Now, granted, it's easier when you have someone paying you, because then you can speak to anyone. It doesn't matter if they have a budget or not. But
Mhm.
I kept, this is my integrity. And I think about this now and I'm like, I am proud of this moment. All the talks I had scheduled that I thought I was being paid for by my employer, I kept those and I did them all for free because those people were expecting me. Fast forward through that time period, people started asking me, how did you become a speaker? The same way people used to ask me
Yeah.
about
Eating
eating
disorders
disorders,
and
and I
all of that.
developed a book
Yeah.
and a workshop. People now have started asking me about speaking. And so I came up with a book and a workshop. And so that's how it led into speaker coaching. So there was no plan. It was literally like each thing came out of, oh, I'm good at this. And this is good advice for anyone. Anything you're good at, it comes easily to you, so you don't realize it doesn't come easily to everyone. If you can help other people get there, people want that knowledge, people want that guidance. And so you don't have to necessarily go get another degree. Let's say, like, I have my same dietitian training. I didn't become some kind of like special PhD in speaking, but I used everything I knew and I just put it into this book. And I thought of the book, honestly, as a glorified business card for being a speaker coach. But then,
Mhm.
haha, COVID, and speaking just, it was just a huge question mark. And so,
Yeah.
just in the past 2 years, speaking is now, I would say, double what it was before the pandemic, because we got all the online stuff too.
Uh-huh.
And now I've really been able to launch that speaker coaching business that I wanted to do before COVID, when I released the book in 2019, and it just wasn't good timing. So anyway, that was a long way to describe the path, but it was not planned. It was just each step I just got better and better at it, and people wanted to know, how did you do it? And so I developed a product that would help them do it too. Because, by the
Yeah.
way, I'll just say, I am a total abundance mentality person. I don't ever believe that teaching someone what I do is somehow going to take away from me or my business. So I am
Right.
happy to spread the word.
Yeah, yeah. There's so many opportunities out there, and there's so many things that you said that I resonate with and want to underline. But I think one of them is just realizing that just because we are the expert doesn't mean that other people are the experts. And I think that even goes for us if you're a practitioner and you're seeing patients and you're starting to have that confidence gap of, what do I really know? What do I know more than someone else? And it's a lot. It's just, once we get close to things and become a bit of an expert on it, it's hard to take us back to that beginner mentality of, there's still a lot that other people need to learn in order to get to this point, and recognizing that.
Yes, and you're reminding me of, after I got laid off from what I thought would be my forever job, I started doing eating disorders boot camps again. And
Mm.
I thought, oh my gosh, I haven't stayed up to date. I haven't seen patients. What if people ask me about the microbiome or something I don't know? And I just thought, you know what, I'll just go. And my first boot camp coming back had 3 people in it. Okay. And that was after having workshops that had 30 people in them. So it was a
Mhm.
little bit discouraging, but I just thought, you know what? Those 3 people want the information. So off I went to San Diego. The first question one of the people asked me was, I work at a college and I see the students that have eating disorders. Is it okay if I talk to the counselors that see my same patients? And I was like, bam, I don't need to know about the microbiome. It's
Yeah.
really basic information that you don't
Yep.
even think of as having learned that once, because it's just become part of what you do.
Exactly. Yeah, I think that's so critical. It's for me as well. As I have this podcast, and there's so many, we talk about marketing, and there's so many facets to marketing, there's so many facets to speaking, to eating disorders, to all of these things. You don't need to necessarily, or to nutrition in general, you don't need to know every specific thing. I think even that could probably be for some folks thinking about speaking too, and wondering, what questions am I going to get from the audience, and what I'm going to be standing up here as this expert, and what if I don't know the answer? Or what if people send me these really like tough questions? And I don't
Yes,
know if you
and
have for
will
that.
tell you that I
Yeah.
think the Q&A is really what it's all about, because you could memorize a talk. A spokesperson could just memorize a talk and give a talk, and they could
Mhm.
maybe deliver it better than you, and they won't say it as many times. But when it gets to that Q&A, all they have is what they've memorized. They do not have the expertise to answer a question. And so, to me, when people say we're going to have like a 80 minutes and then 90 and then 10-minute Q&A. And
Mhm.
I say, why don't we break for questions a couple of different times? Or is it okay if I tell people, just ask me questions in the middle? Just ask me
Mhm.
questions organically as they come to your mind, because that's the true expert, is the person who can answer those questions. With that said, a true expert also feels okay saying, I don't know the answer to that one. I'd love to follow up with you later after I ask a colleague. And what's super hard about that is we don't believe, I guess, in our, like at school, let me use that example. You're taking a test, you don't know the answer, you cannot write down, let me talk to some classmates and I'll get back to you on Tuesday. Like that,
Yeah.
you're not going to get any points for that. But
Yeah.
in the real world, saying to someone, I hadn't considered that, like, give me some time to think that over. If I could get your email address, I could get back to you next week. That is a
Mhm.
totally legitimate answer. And not only a legitimate answer, but it actually shows that you care and you didn't
Yeah.
just make up some bullshit, right?
Right.
Or just
Yeah.
say that, get all flustered and can't function or something. Like, being an
Yeah.
expert doesn't mean knowing everything. And by the way, I learned that from my time working with patients with eating disorders, because some people would ask me things like, how many calories are there in lipstick? And I think, oh, I don't know that. Am I a bad dietitian? And then my wise mind would come in and be like, wait, I don't know the answer to that, because that is not a question that people need to know.
Yeah. I think that's the other thing too, is that there's questions that people are going to ask that they should be answered and follow up with, and they're good. And then there's other ones where you can very graciously redirect because it's
Yes.
not really an appropriate question
Yes.
anyway
Yes,
for
but
yeah.
it's okay. So my very first talk that I gave, this is so sad to think about, but this really happened. I was giving a talk at a workshop. I was just given 1 hour to speak, and pretty early on, someone disputed me on something.
Oh.
And she's now my friend, but back then I was like, oh, my arch enemy, which is crazy that we became friends. But I let the whole talk get derailed over that. And it was
Mhm.
uncomfortable for everybody. And I cried afterwards. And I went to therapy afterwards. And it was awful. And this
Yeah.
is, again, I'm so ancient in the eyes probably of some people listening, but I went to the library back before you could Google things or chat GPT.
The
No, I
library
went to
is
the
still a
library.
wonderful place.
Yes. And I pulled out every book on public speaking. I didn't read it. I just looked at the table of contents or the index and found what to do when you have a heckler. And
Mm.
I took notes on all that. And then I came up with my three-pronged approach, and I'm willing to share it. It's really good.
Ooh, yes, please
Yeah.
do.
Okay. So the three-pronged approach, and it can be a heckler, and as long as it's not someone where you're like security, right? It
Yeah.
could be a heckler that's trying to be difficult, or it can just be someone who has actually just a question that's not appropriate, like you said. And so
Mhm.
this is the three prongs. Number one, you thank them for bringing it up. Even if in your heart you're like, ugh, you just
Yeah.
say, oh, you know what, Whitney, I'm so glad you brought that up. It's not, oh, and then part two is you tell them why you're not going to talk about it now. It's not something I've considered, and I need some time to think about that. Or I feel like that's going to take a little more time for me to answer, and is more of a specific for you and may not be of interest to the rest of the audience. So could we meet afterwards, and I'd be happy to help you with that. So number one, thank them, kind. Number
Mhm.
two, explain why you're not going to talk about it right now. Could be, but thank you for bringing that up, but it's actually out of the scope of what we're here to talk about today. And then number three, and this may be the most important, you break eye contact, because the audience will look where you look. So if you're waiting for that person to
Oh.
say, okay, thank you, please move on, that's not going to happen, especially if they are trying to distract you on purpose, right? They're going
Yeah.
to keep talking, but this, but that, but how can you, blah, blah, blah. How can you recommend seed
Yeah.
oils, whatever. So
Right.
instead, you have to, okay, thank you, Whitney, for bringing that up.
Yeah.
You know what? I feel like that's more of a personal question. Let's talk about that after the session. Moving on to my next slide, la 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 la, and you give them no opportunity to keep it going, and the audience follows you and where you look, and you have moved on. Neutralized.
Yeah. Threat neutralized. That's so great. And I'm sure you are full of those kinds of tactics because speaking, it's the selling of it, just like any kind of business or nutrition counseling. Like you need to learn how to actually do the service that you're providing. And then you need to learn how to sell it and market yourself and
Totally.
all of that
I mean,
too.
every person that's been in my speaker coaching program, they're like, yeah, I'm a speaker, or I want to be a speaker. Not one of their websites had a tab in the menu for speaking. Not
Mm-hmm.
one.
Mm. Yeah. And I think partially sometimes that can be because they're not focusing on the selling of it. And also it could be a confidence thing too. I've talked with some people where they know they want to get out there, they know they want to do it, but they're not taking that first step of really going out
Yeah.
there and all of that. And I don't know if you encounter that and what advice you have for anyone who's just, I just can't get myself out there, or I'm not taking that first step. What was the hardest thing for you when you started speaking?
So speaking for me is just comes totally naturally.
Mm-hmm.
The hardest thing for me is probably charging, learning to charge appropriately. But for someone who's out there thinking, should I do it? Should I not do it? Honestly, it's not a quick answer. You really have to delve into it because one of my speaker coaching clients was like, I give speeches in the shower. I love doing it. I'm picturing myself on a huge stage for a TED talk or whatever, and people are loving me. But when I get into actually doing it in real life, I lose my confidence. And that took weeks to talk through. We didn't just talk about that for weeks, but it would come up as we were doing the work.
Yeah.
So to me, it's sort of like take the steps, move forward. And as you move forward, your insecurities come up and then you can deal with them. It's sort of like if it all stays in your head, you don't find out what the insecurities are or what the roadblocks are. You have to actually take steps. And so when I would give her an assignment, and she wouldn't do it, that's when we would talk about it. So what got in your way? I don't know if I have time. I'm like, if you don't have time to do that, you don't have time to be a speaker. And I know you want to be a speaker. So it's almost like therapy for speakers
Yes.
of what's
Yes.
getting in your way. And she's doing great now because we got through it, whatever the roadblock was.
Yeah, I think that resonates so much. And I know for myself too, in my business, I'm trying to remind myself that everything takes practice. And if you don't do that first, even hobbies, I want to take up painting and I want my very first painting to be perfect and look great. And it's, you
No one
got to
speaks Mandarin
start.
Chinese in one day. No.
Right. All of these things take time, but it is so scary to quote unquote fail, even though you're not failing if you get back up and move forward,
Right.
but to not be perfect. And I think especially in some of the professions that are listening to this, that perfectionism is there
Oh,
and we
it's so
want to
real. It's
be
so real.
the best. And yeah, and so it keeps us from taking that first step. And so I think that that's really important to bring up and recognize that if you're not taking action, and that was for me when I was starting my business, I realized I was talking to a friend and she was like, I think you need a coach, because I wasn't taking the step, and it was because of mental blocks that were
And you
happening.
know what helps? What helps is listening to other speakers because just as an example, I remember going to, let's say, a Fancy and hearing Martha Beck or hearing Susie Orman and thinking, I'm as good of a speaker as them. And they got paid multi tens of thousands of dollars to do this, right? Or I went to a
Yeah.
National Speakers Association meeting, a local one, because the president of the National Speakers Association was going to be speaking there. And I thought, well, this guy has got something, right?
Yeah.
And then I thought, I'm as good of a speaker as him. So that
Yep.
can help. Or even sometimes I'm thinking of, okay, this is totally random and not exactly what we're talking about, but talk about building your confidence. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Someone contacted me from a college during COVID and said, what's your fee for a 1 hour webinar? And I said, whatever my fee was at that time was right in the beginning of COVID. And we didn't know what to charge. So I was like, I'm going to sit at home and talk for an hour in my own house. Okay. $500.
Mm-hmm.
And which is not my webinar fee now.
Yeah, I'm sure.
Lesson learned.
Yeah.
But she said, oh my gosh, I'm so relieved because the last person I talked to said their fee was 10,000. Were they coming to us? And she said, no, for, and fast forward, that person was giving a presentation like in the next couple of months that was free to attend online. And I was like, this is going to be so good. And I told my husband he had to come sit with me. I'm like, this is a $10,000 an hour speaker. So you have to watch this too, because it's going to be so good. It was terrible. And I
Which
was like,
not to like, yeah, I mean, everyone, but yeah.
oh, it was so bad. The speaker was not prepared. Obviously, they have a
Mm.
nice big ego, healthy, good for
Uh-huh.
them to think that like I could just show up and just
Yeah.
vomit words and I'll
Yeah.
get paid $10,000. Good for you. You have got it all figured out, person.
Yeah.
But it was so informative.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
To think, oh, wow. And good on them. I am not
Yeah.
judging them. I'm just saying I bring more to my talks and $500 is not my fee anymore.
Yeah. Lots of lessons learned from that one. That's
Yes.
crazy. Good for you for asking and asking what they were. That's such a gap. And I'm sure you were just like, man, we always make that mistake only once though of charging
Right.
too little usually.
And now, okay, so that was before I was a speaker coach.
Yeah.
Now I always talk about aiming high because you can negotiate down, but most people are never going to pay you more than what you ask for. And so it's very interesting to me that people think of pricing their speaking as you go to the grocery store and this is how much a box of cereal costs and you don't get to negotiate. And as dietitians, I'm a dietitian, that we
Hmm.
don't have that skill. We're never taught that. But here's the thing, again, with eating disorders, which is something I totally understand. I had an eating disorder. I get the mindset. We're doing negotiations all the time. You only eat 800 calories a day. How about 1500? And they negotiate, right? It's like,
Yeah.
you know that you're just throwing out a starting offer. And
Yeah.
so it's the same thing. But people think if I say a number too high, then they are going to just say no.
Hmm.
But that's not how it works. First of all, you have to paint yourself into the picture so that they don't want to say no. But
Yeah.
second of all, you say a number and then they will tell you what is in their budget. They'll say, oh, we can't afford that. Oh, and that's where this handout comes out, which is 12 ways to counter you're not in our budget. But I do
Hmm.
think people think they're just going to say no instead of realizing this is a business negotiation. If they say we can't afford that, then you can say what is in your budget. And then you can start taking things away. You can say, oh, you know what? For that, I can't come in the night before and do a VIP dinner. I can't do a book signing after, but I could still do the presentation if we make it an hour and I can look at the flights. And as long as I can get out that same day, I can do an hour presentation for that amount. And if they're
Hmm.
really hooked on having that book signing and that VIP dinner, you can come up with ideas and ways to help them pay for it. But if they just want the talk, if that's what fits in their lower budget, that's great. There's just so many aspects that you can negotiate. And I think people just get so scared and they negotiate with themselves first and they come in with their lowest offer because they really
Yeah.
want the gig instead of coming
Yeah.
in with the highest offer, knowing that there will be negotiation to bring it down.
Yeah. Yeah.
Or
That's
they just take your high offer and you just are so
right.
happy.
That's the best case scenario, which can also
Yes.
happen.
Yes.
Yeah.
Is you should charge the amount where you're not resentful that you're going and you're driving there like, why? Why did I say I would do this? But you're also not like having night sweats like, am I really worth it? Am I really worth it? It has to be
Right.
a middle ground, and every time you do a great job, you can keep raising your price because you know you were worth it. But it's not,
Hmm.
you can't come in as a $10,000 speaker if you don't have something to deliver. You can, but you
Yeah.
won't get hired ever again.
Right.
So that's where you have to pick somewhere in between. You can't just you can say I won't get out of bed for less than $10,000 and you might get a talk or two. That's fine. But
Hmm.
in general, you're trying to give someone a guide and then they can negotiate with you. And I feel like that the idea of someone, if they're really nervous and they don't know, then start giving free talks because again, there's nothing to lose. If the Girl Scouts want you to come talk about, I don't know,
Yeah.
packing a healthy lunch, and
Yeah.
you charge nothing, then too bad for them if they get a talk that was worth nothing. More than likely they get a talk that was worth a
That's worth.
$1,000, and you
Yeah.
know that and you see that and you can
Hmm.
then feel more confident moving forward. So you don't have to
Yeah.
start charging an amount that makes you sweat. That's not good.
Yeah. And it sounds like it's also all about being integrity and in integrity, both with yourself,
Oh, you are
to
so right. Yes.
yeah, okay, I don't want to be resenting and cutting myself short, but also I want to be in integrity with the value that I feel is reasonable. And that's
Yes.
part of it too, is that I think speaking fees probably at some point you have to move away from trying to figure out like how many hours is it going to take me
Oh,
to develop
yes.
this thing and all of that. It's
Yes.
about the value that you're delivering, which
Yes.
is going to be much higher typically than if you are still seeing patients and clients and all of that. It is going to be a different fee structure and a different, because these are businesses too. You're speaking, it's just you're paying me not for the time I took to nail the
Right.
hammer. It's that I knew exactly how to hit the nail correctly.
Yes. 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 Yes.
So yeah.
Exactly. And I feel like when you are charging, to me, there's a difference between the professional who takes an hour out of their patient day to go speak and the person who is a speaking professional. Because when I started speaking, I did those contract things where they'll send you a presentation and you'll go out to a company and give the talk for an hour, and they
Okay.
paid like $150 back then.
Mhm.
And then I would come back to work and to see more patients, and I'd be exhausted because I leave it all out there when I
Yeah.
present. And
Yep.
so I had to learn, if I'm going to give a talk, I have to get paid what I would make, at least what I would make in a day of patient care, because that is now a day for speaking. And
Mhm.
that was how I got started, saying I have a day rate. And that's
Okay.
the way I pitch things to this day. I
Mhm.
say, you know what? I know you're saying that you want me to come in and talk to let's say the student body for an hour, but I have a day rate. And so once I'm there, you've got me. So it's going to sound expensive when I say the amount and you think, oh, that's just for 1 hour. No, I will come in and as at 8 in the morning, and I will do a Q&A with your health center staff, and I will
Mm.
do a lunch and learn with your peer advisors, and I will meet with the sorority advisors in the afternoon. You've got me all day. And to me, that's where that justifies that fee, because I was going to be having to wait around all day for my presentation, because I'm not, I mean, I saw this thing on like Behind the Music, and I think it was Fleetwood Mac, and they were like, yeah, we've been all around the world, but we didn't see the world, because yes, you only work for 3 hours at night, but if you are tired, if you are hungover, if you are bored, then you are letting down not only your bandmates, but the thousands of people who paid money to come see you. So you don't
Yeah.
get to go see Tokyo when you're in Tokyo, because then you'll be
Right.
tired in the evening. And I
Yeah.
thought, oh my gosh, that's so weird. I never thought I had something in common with a rock star. But right, but
I love that.
you don't get to work that day and then just give your 1 hour talk. So to me, yes, I price it as a day rate, and I
Yeah.
come up with things that make it seem, yes, we wanted her for that day. And the synergy of speaking to all these different groups on campus, that's just one example, but the synergy of speaking to all those groups on campus and they all get the same information but targeted toward what they need, that's going to leave that campus with so much of a better
Yeah.
sort of mindset moving forward than just that 1 hour talk, which is all they asked for.
Yeah, I love that so much. Going back to, you mentioned website briefly, and obviously I work on websites. And so I would love to ask your opinion. What do you feel a speaker needs to have on their website in order to make it feel like, yeah, I can charge this rate because my value is here?
Yes. Okay. So first of all, you have to have a tab, right? There just simply has to have a tab that's called speaking or speaking engagements. If it's called media, event planners at a super high level might know to click on media or media kit, but a lot of people are not going to know that that's where your speaking information is. And yes, I know
Okay.
you have a services button, and under services maybe is speaking, but if you
Hmm.
really want to be out there as a speaker, speaking has to be one of your main menu headings.
Okay.
On that page, there should be a message from you. It could be at the top, it could be at the bottom, but it says something like, I'm Whitney and this is what I love. Or I'm Jessica and I envision a world where no one is ashamed to talk about their eating. It needs to be your sort of aspirational message, right?
Okay.
That has to be somewhere. It has to have testimonials. What are people saying about Whitney? The best
Hmm.
comments that you've gotten from your presentations. And it doesn't matter if that presentation, let's say that you taught a Nutrition 101 class at a community college and you're like, that
Hmm.
doesn't really count. It's not a presentation. Wrong. If you had a student who said, having you for my
Yeah.
teacher changed my life, great.
Yeah.
Doesn't matter if
Right.
that's not the same talk you're giving anymore, because those testimonials are not necessarily about your content. They can be,
Right.
but it's about you being able to command a room, you being able to connect with an audience. So testimonials that are really going to tell an event planner, you are getting a great speaker here, because
Yeah.
your customer is not the audience. Your customer is the event planner. That is the person you're trying to target with your advertising, and that is the person you want to be happy when you are done with your presentation.
Mm.
So, okay, your
Yep.
mission statement, what's different about you than anyone else,
Hmm.
your, what I call it, your USP, your unique speaking platform, and
Oh,
then
I
your
love that.
testimonials, some pictures of you speaking. Ideally, if you don't have pictures of you speaking, then just pictures of you either pretend speaking or just pictures of you looking at the camera are okay.
Yeah.
Ideally, eventually you want those pictures where someone's in the back of the room and there's all the heads and
Yeah.
you're at the
On
front
the
speaking.
stage. Yep.
Yes. And then you want your signature talks. So, what are your signature talks? So, maybe 3 signature talks that are really for different audiences. So, you may have your community presentation, your for, I'll just make
Like
something up. I was
business
going
or
to say, yes,
something. Yep.
exactly. For small businesses. And then you have your, like your keynote, like maybe you've never delivered it before, but if you had a TED talk, this is what you will talk about. And so
Okay.
you put your title, you have to have a great title. I'm excellent at titles. ChatGPT is okay at titles. A lot of times, if you
Okay.
ask ChatGPT for a title, for a title and subtitle, you'll get a bunch, and then you can mix and match your
Yeah,
favorite
that's
title and
what
your
I like
favorite
doing.
subtitle. Yeah.
Yeah.
So you've got your great title, and then you've got a description of what you deliver. And what's interesting is people who are speakers, they may have a bio on their speaking page and it says Jessica Setnick went to the
Yeah.
University of nobody cares. Nobody cares. It's all about with them. What's in it for me? What
Yep.
are you going to bring to the stage? What are you going to bring to my audience? So in your description of your talks, the last line should say something like, audiences will leave with inspiration and information, or
Mm-hmm.
your group will be talking about this long after the presentation is over. Your last line of your description should be about the outcome, what people are going to
Okay.
walk away with. Participants will be able to go back to work the next day with new skills for efficiency, whatever it is.
Yeah.
And that is the key. Then, last thing is it should have contact information. No fees, no fees. We negotiate our
Okay.
fees after someone has seen the spark. If someone inquires on your website, and you can have a form or
Mm-hmm.
you can just have email me at this address,
Mm-hmm.
either way,
Yep.
you want to be able to speak with them so they can see what you're all about before you ever start talking about prices. If you put your prices on your website, first of all, how can you think about what I just said?
Yeah.
I'm talking about all these different things that I can offer. I'm painting myself into your event so that you
Mm-hmm.
must have me to make the event a success, right? Then I'm going to drop the bombshell on you of how much that's going to cost you. But if I just put that bombshell on my website, then you have no idea what you're getting for that price. So
Yeah.
don't negotiate through emails. Don't pre-negotiate by putting your fee on there. Have some way for them to contact you if you want to gather a little bit of information first. What is the date of your event? What is your expected audience, or what is the name of the event? You can if you want, but
Mm-hmm.
I'm just as happy saying, please email for more information. Let's schedule a time to talk about your event. So
Mm-hmm.
those are the things I would put on a speaker page that would be
Okay.
really effective.
Okay. I love that
Oh,
because it's
PS, if you have a
yes.
video of you speaking, you can do that too. But a lot of
Okay.
people starting out don't have that, or
Yeah.
their video. I have videos on my website. Some of them are terrible quality. I don't have a sizzle reel, but if you have something, that's fine. But if you don't, I would not let that stop you.
Okay. I love that message too. It's like just start where you are, and going back to even like your Girl Scout talk example, like those kinds of talks just to get started are great. Have your partner, have a friend, a colleague come with their iPhone, take some photos of you
Totally.
speaking, get those testimonials, get that up there, because that is just starting to
Yes.
build the momentum. But don't let some of these things, like you had mentioned, if you don't have a photo of you speaking, that's okay. Just use what you have and grow and all of that. Um,
Yes, my best photo that I use when people ask for a headshot is when my mom took of me sitting on the couch. I get so awkward when I am posing for pictures that
yeah.
that was my best one.
Yeah.
So iPhone cameras definitely are such high quality. You can totally use that on your website. Yes, I'm really
Yeah.
glad you said that, because that's another thing people let stop them. I don't have a good
Yeah.
headshot. I don't have a
Yeah.
professional photo. It doesn't
Yeah.
matter. It doesn't matter.
Right.
That's not what you're selling. You're not selling photography. You're
Right.
selling yourself as a speaker.
Yeah, yeah. You just need a well-lit photo representing you
Yes.
smiling, because that's the thing, is that to your point, your audience here are the event planners, and they want to create just an amazing event for
Yes.
their audience. And so they want someone coming in who's dynamic, who's going to form a relationship with people. And so them coming to your site and seeing you on that page and getting a feel for
Yes.
your mission and your
Exactly.
vision and your platform, that is all part of them feeling, okay, yeah, she or
Yes.
he is going to be a great addition to the
Yes.
event.
Because it's all authenticity and integrity. Those are my two key words when it comes to speaking. I will be the first one to tell you, if you want a speaker to talk about vitamins, it's not going to be me at the end, right? You want your speaking page to really represent what you have to offer. You're not trying to bend yourself into a pretzel to fit someone else's need.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. That's a
And
great
so
point.
that's where, for example, I have a coaching client who speaks on women's reproductive health, and her website is basically vomiting flowers. And that wouldn't be my choice. But I want it to be feminine. And so we
Yeah.
use that on her speaker info sheet because
Yep.
that is her vibe. And if someone says, "Ooh, that's too girly or too feminine or whatever," we want someone that's more like hard-hitting medical. By the way, she's hard-hitting medical. Don't misunderstand.
Right.
But if
Right.
you don't want her femininity, let's say, then
Yeah.
she's not the right speaker for you. And she's not going
Right.
to fake it on her
Yeah.
website to fit what you want because you're not going to end up being happy with it. So if
Right.
that's her true authentic self, and everything I write for my speakers, I tell them, this is my draft. It has to feel real for you. I'm a
Yeah.
good wordsmith, but if this doesn't feel right for you, we're not putting it on your website because it has to really represent what you're going to deliver.
Absolutely. Yeah, I think that that's all just so good. And so there are some parallels between branding yourself for like B2C business to consumer and then B2B. You want to have your brand out there. Excuse me. But at the same time, when it comes to selling to these event planners, these B2B business to business, prices are not a good idea to have on your website because people do talk about having prices and packages and more succinct, clear, defined services for counseling. And I think that that still holds true.
And even with media relations, I've seen that where there's prices on the info sheet of different brand partnerships and things like that you're selling.
It's a little bit more easy to define, but for this specific one, we want to be more broad. We want to open the conversation. It's also fine to be inviting people to just send you a note. I talk a lot about allowing people to book a call. That's really, I would say, more for those discovery calls for counseling clients and other services that you might be offering. Probably not so much needing to have a discovery call booking thing for these kinds of things, having an email conversation to open it. You may schedule a call.
I
Oh, no.
disagree.
Oh, you think having, oh, okay.
I think a call for a speaker is so important because
oh yeah, I think a call is great. But the first, like on the website, like the CTA, have you seen people have success with, if you want to get started, here's a button to book a call? Or do you think
so
most
I don't
event
have
planners
a
want
calendar. I ask people to email me so that we can schedule a time to talk. And a lot of my bookings, like I'm looking at my list of upcoming talks, and some people just found me from my website. I do have good SEO on my website. I also have a very specific niche of things I talk about. But looking at that, a lot of that is inbound. And so people will send an email, and instead of responding, of course I respond to the email, but the response to the email is, "I'd love to hear more about your event. When can we talk?" Because for example, I'm thinking of a time that I was going out of town. Someone asked if I could come to their school in California and give a talk about eating disorders. And I looked up the school, and the first line on their website was something like, "A year of tuition costs $45,000. And I was like, okay, if you want me to fly to California and speak to your school. I went to a high school kind of like that. Like, I get the idea that you need more than just to talk to the student body. You need to talk to the parents. You need to talk to the teachers, right? So I pitched them a day rate. This is in an email because I'm going out of town the next day. So I don't have time for a call with this person. And everything I pitched was probably the same stuff I would have pitched in a call, but I was ghosted. And I believe in my heart that it was because it just came across the screen as, this is really expensive. And there was no, here's the sparkle, connection. Here's what I can bring. So the same information that I would have given in a call, I think falls flat when it's just in an email. So no, I would do negotiation for sure. And first thing I want is a call, because the other thing is I'm interviewing them too. I need to find out, like, what if that place said, okay, we'll take your $15,000. We'll see you on May 15th. And I've gathered no information about them. And it turns out we have totally misaligned expectations.
Yeah.
Right?
Oh yeah. I agree. Like, definitely my husband has been like, never talk about money in writing. Get on a call. Like, that's,
okay.
That's
we're on the same page then.
Yeah. So it's more just on the website, the sales process. Like, you could drive people straight to book a call without even sending you an email if you want, or you could have them send you an email, but then you want to get them on a call. And getting on that call, you want to have prepared what you're going to be going over and presenting and pitching to them.
I do it the opposite. I say, tell me about your event.
Yeah.
Tell me, what are the goals? I would say it's like counseling. Like, you try to get lots of information from the person before you start delivering information, because people love to feel heard. right? And if
Oh
there
yeah.
are people who just have that one keynote and they just give it and they don't care what organization it is and their agent just booked them and they don't know, they're in the cab on the way and you're like, oh, we're headed towards wherever. No, we are not that kind of speaker. At
Yeah.
least I don't teach anyone to be that kind of speaker. I want that. I need to find out information about your event. I know all the things I could provide, all the value I can give. I know all the things that give me value. If you tell me you have no budget and I say, well, you have a professional videographer there, because if you can get me a professional video of my presentation that I can then sell to other people, I'm okay with maybe
This
getting a lesser
price
fee
or
or no fee, depending on how far
yeah.
away you are from my home, that kind of thing.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah,
Yeah.
that's a lot of words to say. Yes, I feel like the sparkle cannot be seen on paper. It has to be seen in reality. But I do ask a lot of questions as opposed to going into the call thinking I'm going to pitch you. I'm going to pitch you, but first I really ask a ton of questions. And I think, again, that's where people sometimes make them. I don't know if it's the mistake. To me, it's a mistake. If you put on your website all this stuff about what is your budget, and I used to do that, but I realized that part of what it is it helps people gather their thoughts. I will say that it saved me from some of those people who are like, oh, I don't know what the budget is, because in order to fill out the form they had to talk to the right people, blah blah blah. But at the same
Yeah.
time, I feel like you may lose people that you could have talked them through that process.
Yeah. Yeah, it's one of those things that I've toyed with myself throughout the years, and I think it's just sometimes up to testing too. I think
Yeah.
what you can probably find is if you leave off that budget question from your questionnaire or whatever and you get on a bunch of calls, and all of those people, once you finally learn about them and you give them the pitch and they're like, "Oh, that's double, triple, whatever." If you have a lot of unqualified leads that you're talking to, maybe then it's okay, maybe we're going to
Yes.
start hinting at
Yes.
some
But
pricing.
here's the thing, unqualified can mean a lot of different things, right? Because
Mhm.
I love to talk on like high school students' podcasts. I think that's so fun. And of course, they don't have a budget, right? But if
Yeah.
that's fun for you, then that's great. If that's your mission, that's fantastic. Then
Yeah.
there's the other aspect of it, which is people just unqualified might mean they haven't put any thought into this yet. But
Mhm.
for example, I'm thinking of a dietetic association that said we can't afford your fee, and I said, have you thought about sponsorship? And they're like, yes. I said, tell me. This was someone I knew from having attended one of my workshops, so I felt comfortable having this conversation with her. I said, what are you charging for sponsorships? Because you could do like a presenting sponsor, right?
Mhm.
And she says, oh, we're asking for $150. And I said, don't pick up the phone for $150. Absolutely not. Okay, here's how you're going to do it. You're going to have a presenting sponsor, and you can tell people you can be the presenting sponsor for Jessica Setnick's talk for $5,000. And if they say we can't afford that, you say we could be a co-presenting sponsor. By the time I got to that dietetic association, they had a presenting sponsor for every single presentation. And it's not like I had to talk about the sponsor thing, but
Yeah.
helping people understand. I've had college, it's a grad student and they're supposed to schedule something for Eating Disorder Awareness Week,
Yeah.
and they're like, my budget is $200, and I'll say, okay, but here's the thing: if we could get all the psychology professors to give extra credit for this, maybe the psychology department can pitch in a few $100s. And what about the athletic department and all the sororities and fraternities? They all are required to, like, once a semester, have something that's for blah blah blah. And so
Mhm.
let's get the Greek life people involved, and let's pull in these other cost centers or budget centers, and people can
Yeah.
pitch in. So in other words, again, you say unqualified, but I say jumping off point for further negotiations. And some people maybe
Yeah.
aren't willing to help their client come up with these different, maybe you don't need that many speaking gigs, nice for you, but for me, I love to help someone figure out how to bring me. And sometimes it doesn't work, and I think of it
Mhm.
as me honing my skills of pitching, and that there's
Mhm.
value in that too. So I guess I'm just trying to say, unless you are literally getting so many unqualified leads that you just have to put a doorstop between you and the leads,
Mhm.
I want to talk to everyone that is interested and see if I can make it work. And
Yeah.
there is a middle section that you could have, which we haven't talked about yet, but it's called a speaker one sheet, right? But it might be more than one page. You might call it a media kit, but that can also be something in the middle where someone says, I'm interested in hearing more about you. And you can say, let me send you my speaker one sheet. You'll get an idea of what I have to offer. And then let's schedule a call. And so sometimes you can do some of your pitching not in an email, but a speaker one sheet is a 0.5 between
Uh-huh.
a boring email and you live.
Yeah. Yeah. It's just giving them a little bit more information
Yeah.
and getting them further
Lots of
along.
testimonials. Yes.
I love that you mentioned that it's not about necessarily that the budget not being there is a no, that you can help them creatively. That example was great. And it's also not you settling for that $200 fee.
Right.
Like you again stayed in integrity with this is what I charge, this is the value that I bring, but instead of feeling, oh, I want to help them and if this is all the money they have, it's no, let's find ways to bring me there, but
Yes.
let's figure it out together.
Yes.
So
Yes.
that's awesome. So many good pieces of advice when it comes to selling our services and all of that when it comes to public speaking, because yeah, I think that's part of the battle a little bit. You need to be a great speaker, but you also need to know how
Yeah.
to market and sell yourself and whatnot.
Unless you're willing to give 15% to an agent.
Oh, right. Yeah, that too, which sounds like you haven't gotten to that point. I don't think you need it.
No, I
So,
joined a speakers bureau at some point and I felt like they took my leads and then part of my money. I don't know that
mm,
maybe they got me a few gigs, but I feel like no one knows what you do better than yourself. So again, until you are at a kind of a different level, I like selling myself. I think I'm better at selling me than probably anyone else.
yeah, for sure. And because you're also honing your speaking skills even as you're doing the pitching and those negotiations. So
But
love
I'm
it.
touching base with what the customers want, right? Even if I'm not
Yes.
what the customers want, it might help me as a speaker coach for my next person. And by the way, if you recommend someone really good to an event planner, you get double the karma. The event planner's thrilled and the person you recommended is thrilled.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it's great. And I think that's such a great point too about the learning through the sales process and learning what our customers need. I think for many of us, we shy away from sales and we don't really love it, but it can be just such rich information to be learning what the problems are of our customers, what their goals are, what they're using to describe the challenges that they're having. And if you
Yes,
outsource
all of
that,
that.
that's just knowledge that you're really not going to get, and it can be so fruitful. It can take some time to step out of your pitching, and you have to then also be reflecting afterwards, okay, what were some of the things that they brought up, and maybe jot some notes or something, but it can be really useful as you move forward. So
Agreed.
we covered so much ground. I feel like there's so much more I want to ask you, but we got to wrap
Part
up.
two.
Yeah, for sure. But you have so many great resources. You mentioned a guide. Let's talk about that and also where people can go to learn from you, maybe get coached by you and all that good stuff.
Sure. So, A Dietitian's Guide to Professional Speaking is available at dietitianspeakingguide.com, and you can download the first chapter for free. And I would say you could put any word in there. I know dietitian, so that's why I called it that, because I am a dietitian. And but I would put you could put in a social worker's guide to professional speaking. You could put in a registered nurse's guide to professional speaking, any health professional, possibly any other professional, but I specifically mention health professionals because we are not typically trained in asking for money for our services. And
Mm,
so that's the eye that I came at, or the direction I came at with the book is you
mhm,
may not have experience directly asking for money for your services, and that's going to hold you back. And here's what you need to look at. So
mhm,
dietitianspeakingguide.com is there. The 12 ways to respond to you're not in our budget is on the free resources page of understandingnutrition.com. And then my sort of umbrella website is jessicasetnick.com. That's where you can schedule a consultation. That's where you can read about the things that are on my speaking page, et cetera, et cetera. And
mhm.
I would love anyone who's listening to this that wants to talk about it, schedule a consultation. Let's do it, because yes, it is a big commitment to sign on as a speaker coaching client. I asked for a 12-month commitment because we really it takes time, right?
Yeah.
And so everyone that's working with me this year, I expect them to make back all their money in 2026, but that's still a ways away. And
Mhm.
so I don't necessarily do one-off 1 hour consultations for speaking, but I'll make an exception, and we could do a quick 1 hour. What could I, maybe a website review? What could you do
Mm.
differently on your website? And I'm happy to help you get started.
Oh, I appreciate that. And that sounds amazing. Yeah, I think we didn't even get into all of the many reasons and benefits of speaking, but I think it is one of those things that it's a great revenue source. It's great to get yourself out there. I think it can increase your confidence. So many reasons, right?
Promote yourself, promote a product that you have to sell. That's, I have a whole chapter, I think, in the book on what value you can get from giving even a free talk.
Mm, that's great. Awesome. And of course, it's helping the public and bringing people along and giving
Oh yeah,
your
that part,
knowledge.
you're
And
right, it
yeah,
almost goes
that's
unsaid, but I'm glad you
yeah.
said it. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. I realized I was like, yeah, it's not just about us. This is about like growing our businesses and all of
Yeah.
that. But yes, always like the more that we can get reputable advice and
Oh
yeah,
yeah, and
education
that's
out there.
my whole platform in helping others, is that the more dietitians are speaking, the more good information is getting out there, the better the world will be.
I love it. That's great. What a great note to end on. Jessica, thank you so, so much for such a wonderful time and talk and all the
Yeah.
knowledge you've shared today. And I hope folks will check out all of your great resources.
Fabulous. And I'll be excited to schedule part 2.
Yes. Love it. Thanks. Thank you so much for listening to today's episode of my conversation with Jessica. A huge thank you to Jessica for sharing all of your knowledge with us. We certainly shared a few laughs and covered a lot of ground when it comes to not just selling your services as a speaker, but how to build that confidence and even her three-pronged approach to dealing with hecklers. I loved that. So lots of good stuff. And there's just so much more to learn from Jessica. So be sure to connect with her with the links in the show notes that we have here. And if you would like to get Jessica's support as you branch out into the world of speaking, be sure to visit her website, also linked in the show notes, and make sure you get that resource that we talked about as well. So lots of good stuff from Jessica. And remember, if you enjoyed this episode, please give us a review. It only takes a few minutes and it would really mean a lot. It helps our show grow and reach more people like you. And sharing is caring. So be sure to share this episode. That's actually how Jessica and I got connected, as a colleague had shared one of our podcast episodes. So you never know who needs to hear or who's going to be connected by listening to the podcast. So if you have someone in mind who might benefit from what we covered today, be sure to share it, and maybe you'll give them a little boost of confidence and encouragement to keep going and pursuing what they want to in their business. So that's it for me. Although I will also mention, we talked about websites and all the things that you need to be having on a speaker page on your website. That was very gracious of Jessica to detail that with us as well. If you have a website, but it's not working for you, or you don't have one yet, and you really want to get one going so that you can launch your speaking career and your business, then make sure to check out our program, the Wellness Pro Website System. Doors did just close, but you can still check out the program, get on the wait list, and you'll be the first to know. Sometimes we do little openings here and there. So there's plenty of opportunities to enroll. You don't have to wait too long. Go to wellnessprowebsite.com. And that is officially it for me. I will catch you next week on The Growth Show. Thanks so much for listening.